Hello, everybody, and welcome to another installment of Walking Down the Warwick Road. It's a great show today. The first part of our two-part series on Tommy Docherty, the Doc. What a time at United it was. Of course, joining me as always is my co-host Pete Molyneux, and joined by another longtime Red as our guest today and author of Manchester United Ruined My Wife, which I think a lot of us as United fans can probably relate to if their spouse isn't a football fan. But David Blatt, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, living the life of Riley, watching the sun go down over the sea. If that doesn't get you, I don't know what does. Yeah.
Very nice, very nice. And Pete, how are you doing?
Doing very well, thanks, Tim. Yes, very well indeed.
Amazing. Well,
snow.
Yeah, you have a lot of snow there. I saw. Yeah, you guys are.
So yeah, it was good.
Terrific. Well, David, I wanted, before we get into talking about the Doc, and obviously, as people know, we try to start the show with a little bit of present day United, but I think today we've decided we're just going to leave Ole's Red Army to the channels that are covering present day matters at the club, and we're just going to dive right into the Doc's Red Army. But before we get there, David, can you just come to you first? How did you obviously Cockney Red? How did United get into your blood there?
I mean, I've been supporting them since before I was born. You know, blood's red, bedroom faces north, all that sort of stuff. But I have to blame my mother, because I was about 6 or 7. And she realized I was suffering from this brand new disease that was just happening. It's called square eyes, where if you watch too much TV, you get square eyes, which was impossible because TV at my age used to close about 4:45 and then start again at 7:30. But anyway, so she forced my dad, who wasn't really into football, to take me to matches. I'm a Cockney Red, and the nearest league team to where we were the Mighty O's, Lake Norriamp. So he took me to that one. It was fine. It was cold. People were taller than me. I saw bits through men's shoulders, but it was okay. I didn't go all the way, just a bit of foreplay. And then my dad took me to what I call the Bermondsey Triangle between West End, Tottenham and Arsenal. These places, the people were taller, the weather was colder, still didn't see much, but okay. Then one night, which only years later did I realise the significance, February 1958, he took me to Highbury.
Wow.
And even just walking down to the ground, it was an atmosphere, it was electric. Dad, what team's that? It's Man United, son. Well, Dad, that's the team for me. I couldn't explain it. I fell in love, and I've been in love ever since. And so I can say I've seen Duncan Edwards play. Don't ask me who he was. It was, again, seeing things, but wow, what an atmosphere. And it was just electric. And that's it. So jobs, career, women, all were centered around trying to get to the match on match days.
Amazing. I think a lot of people can relate to that, to the match day aspect of it. But you're right, to be able to see Duncan Edwards, even if you were just a little guy at the time and maybe didn't quite appreciate it. To say that is terrific.
And that was the final game of the Babes, was it, in this country, David?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That's some debut, that.
Yeah.
It took me years, obviously, for the significance of that to really hit me, Yeah.
Right.
I think, shit, I was there at that game. It was just an amazing game, 5-4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was everything that I'd been missing before. So that's when I consummated the marriage with United, was on that day.
That's my initial reaction when you said that was wow, because knowing that was the last game before, obviously, the tragedy on February 6th is just amazing.
Yeah. And I saw them whenever they were in London, because I was still on pocket money, acne spots, whatever. I couldn't afford to go to Old Trafford. So whenever they were in London, I went to see them. And then a guy I called a cousin of mine, he wasn't really, he introduced me to something called the London and District Supporters Club. That little oink, age 14, on pocket money, you get to Manchester and back for like $5. And that's it. That's when it all changed, And if I occasionally, and I do mean occasionally, had a girlfriend, right, Saturday night, where are we going? I'm going to Old Trafford. You seeing another girl? No, I'm going to Old Trafford. The M1, A5 through Brown Hills, M6. Get back 11 o'clock at night. drop off near Euston Station into the George to catch on the side of Euston Station to catch match of the day, and then make my way home. Yeah,
Amazing.
Nothing beats it. Nothing beats it.
I love it. I love it. Well, obviously we're here to talk about the doc, and I suppose, you know, Pete, you and I have been talking about doing this show sort of since the inception of Walking Down the Warwick Road, and obviously, you know, we lost the doc on New Year's Eve, and so I suppose this show comes a bit more poignant. Obviously, we want to extend our condolences to his family and to everybody, you know, close to him. Sort of, I mean, where do we start? I guess maybe leading up to the doc's arrival. Can maybe you and David give us a sense of what was going on in and around the club at the time? Sort of obviously coming off winning the European Cup in 1968, getting to the semifinals the final year. What was it? Seemed like almost like a drastic or a sharp fall off from those days to where we were in December of 1972 when Frank O'Farrell left and the doc came in.
I think George Best summed it up many years later. He was just starting out. He'd reached a pinnacle for the club. And so he thought his career's just starting to go on from there. But he said later, there was a feeling around the club, we've made it. We've done it. We reached the promised land, as they now call it, and stuff. And he noticed a taping off, a complacency. You saw it the following season. We huffed and puffed. The magic wasn't there. When we were in the European Cup, we played our best football. That 3-0 quarter-final win over Rapid Vienna, superb. But the rest of the time, there was a tailing off. And gradually it got to him, and we all saw it. We didn't know there was going to be another sort of 26 years to come, but we also felt that it's going to get worse before it gets worse. And in the end, he had this sort of mentality, well, what the hell? So you followed them, not expecting to win a trophy, but just for the sheer hell of it, basically, you know.
Having been fortunate, a bit like yourself, David, now to live through, I caught the last 6 years of Busby, and of course lived through all the Fergie years. And one thing that's very apparent is when you have a man or a woman that builds up an empire, a dynasty, it is very, very, very difficult indeed to replace that dynasty, certainly right away. And the few years after, when you look back, you're right. At the time, we thought we'll just come back, didn't we, this season or this month? Yeah. But Busby went. Wilf McGuinness came in just for 18 months. I mean, to have gone from a manager being there for nearly 25 years to one being there for just 18 months, unheard of. Then they brought Frank O'Farrell in, I think the summer of 71. Who raised the club a bit at first. I think he put Morgan in midfield and made Gowlin a midfielder. And we went to the top of the league at the end of 1971, the calendar year. And I think at the start of 72, we were top of the league on New Year's Day. And so I guess I thought, okay, well done, Frank. We're back where we were just a few years ago. But from top of the league on the 1st of January 72, but we ended in eighth position, with hardly winning any games in the second half of that season. And as you rightly say, Georgie Best disappeared off to Mallorca. And they left O'Farrell in charge through the summer of 72. But the deterioration that had been there in the first part of the calendar year carried on into 72, 73. Yeah. And it culminated, I think you might have gone to this, David, it was on your doorstep. We lost 5-0 at Crystal Palace, who were bottom of the league.
The famous three words, I was there. Yeah. In fact, leading up to that, there'd been a couple of green shoots. We'd bought McDougall, who I remember playing great for Bournemouth, got a wonderful goal against Aston Villa away, and I was hoping for great things. Also, George Best on one side, and we got Ian Storey-Moore on the other. Now, we got a history at United from Cavani, Zlatan, Larson, Ron Davis, Wyn Davis, buying great players when we should have bought them younger. Cavani, brilliant. But going back to the time, Ian Storey-Moore, when I saw him and George on either side, coming towards me in the Stretford end, Ian Storey-Moore could do things, defied description. I could ping the ball from his left foot to his right foot, almost like he was flying, and went straight past the fullback. I remember a 2-0 win against Huddersfield. You might say only Huddersfield, but the way they played and the chemistry between them, I thought, we're on our way back. But of course, unfortunately, terrible injury to Ian Storey-Moore. We were never really able to see his true potential. One thing I also remember, if you do, about Liverpool, the 2-0 game, how the scoreboard end escorted the Liverpool fans out of the ground while the game was still on, if you understand my meaning.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. I mean,
we beat Liverpool. Even in that bad year, we did have just a handful of good results. But I think you touched on a very good point there, David, because the problem with United then, say 71, 72, going forward, we were very strong. We still had Morgan, Kidd, Best, Law, Charlton. They bought Ian Storey-Moore, who'd been a great player for Forest. But the defence, really, when we look back now, needed fixing. So on our day when it all clicked, we could outpace teams by simply scoring more than them. But I think he was unlucky, Frank O'Farrell, because of the Ian Storey-Moore got injured. It brought Buchan, who went on to be a great stalwart for United.
I was just gonna ask you about that, Pete, because obviously in '71, like United were top of the league at Christmas, and then Buchan comes in March. If O'Farrell had gone out and was able to bring in Buchan earlier, do you think that would have helped out with those defensive frailties earlier when United were flying a little bit at the start of the season?
Possibly, with hindsight, you may say so, but I don't think anybody really thought that at the time. I think any manager, when they go into certainly a relegation situation, which United were very rarely in, you either do things by evolution or by revolution. So Fergie, when he came in, he kept all the players, more or less. He just added one or two and did it by evolution till it came to 89 when he tried 3 years and he wasn't going anywhere. And then he realised he had to do it by revolution. Frank O'Farrell, I think, got to about March 72 and realised the old guard weren't going to do it. And we're starting to build something new. And that would have been Buchan, Ian Storey-Moore, etc. And then Bestie might have stayed and applied himself better. But the trouble is, the league-wise, we were going down every week. We went down one place, slowly but surely. And the Palace defeat, really, it was the end. We lost 5-0. I remember the United fans rampaged all the way back from Palace to Euston. It was terrible. We were on the front pages and the back pages. But they sacked Frank O'Farrell 3 days later. George Best wrote to them that week. Sorry. I'll stop in a second, I promise you. George Best wrote to United that week and said he don't want to play anymore. Can you cancel the contract? Sacked O'Farrell. United were in a very bad way at that point. Not bad in terms of the air crash, the disaster at Munich, or 2 bankruptcies. But in modern times, that was one of the lowest points for United. They were spiralling. And I think that's the reason why they got somebody in of Docherty's calibre who could be a bit of a wheeler and dealer. But I guess that takes us to the start of Docherty coming in against Leeds and whatever. But go on, David.
Well, the Palace game, I remember going to it and the rumours were everywhere. Is this O'Farrell's last game? Is he there? Has he gone already? We kicked off and within a minute we could have scored. Willie Morgan down the right. I thought, if only that had gone in. But the rest of the 89 minutes, we were awful. They had Don Rogers, who scored a hat-trick. We made him look like a world-class forward. There was nobody on him. He went through us like a knife through butter. That was a really embarrassing game. That was one of my lowest points because we couldn't see any way out of it. And O'Farrell had been quite successful at Leicester. He'd done a good job. So we thought it was a logical progression. Not the best manager we could have had, but a logical progression to steady the ship and go up. But for a variety of reasons, people often say, and even now they say, well, Busby shouldn't have been behind the scenes. I don't agree with that. Busby let the manager do what he's want. He's there if he wanted it. That the balance between getting an icon and the new manager, I don't think that was it. I can't really pinpoint, other than say the injuries to certain players, because Martin Buchan turned out to be a brilliant player. Can you imagine him playing today? There was about 3 seasons where he was perfect. He was a robot. He never made a mistake. He was incredible, his consistency. If he'd have been in a United team, just imagine, just think what that would have been like.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Oh, it was certainly a good purchase. I think it was more to do with the clicks behind the scenes. Sometimes a manager has to get rid of the clicks. Again, Fergie did on a couple of occasions. A lot of the players, they'd grown up with Busby. They'd climbed to the top of Everest, hadn't they, in '68. They were still playing golf with Sir Matt. And I think the manager had to, any manager that came in would have found that very difficult, I think, from the stories that have come out since. But in other times, O'Farrell might have done it, but it needed urgent surgery.
And we needed a surgeon, and in came the doc. Yeah. Go ahead, David. Go on.
No, I mean, I forgot what I was going to say there. I mean, no, I remember, Doc's first game, 1-1 Leeds, and we thought maybe he could lighten the load because everybody was growing old at the same time. That's why the Leeds things came to mind. Because Leeds in their heyday, they all grow old together. Revie wouldn't let go. And so we saw what happened. And that's very similar to what happened to us. On paper, we had some great players. But actually, on the pitch, they weren't able to do it anymore. And that was the difference. They could raise it for the odd game, or a cup game. But I remember we got like George Graham in. And we lost 3-1 away to Arsenal. And I was actually in the North Bank that time, trying to be incognito. And they were waving at George Graham, but we were such a shadow of the scene. We looked on paper, and you look on the pitch, and it's 2 different teams. Yeah. So there was only one way. Yeah.
So obviously the doc comes in, and so after the Crystal Palace game in December of '72, charismatic fellow, obviously big club like Manchester United. You know, Pete, we've talked about this in the past. It needs a strong character. It needs someone that can handle the pressures that's going to come with that job. He'd obviously had Docherty's Diamonds at Chelsea, brought through some very good young players there. Yeah. So he had some pedigree in terms of club football and you know, being able to work within the confines of another you know, young system where we want to bring through young players. And then of course comes from the Scotland setup. So when you look back at sort of that appointment at the time, for the both of you, were you happy with the appointment? Did you think that he was the right man to come in and sort of get this ship on the right course again?
He was very positive. He reflected. He talked like a fan in many ways, which we could all relate to. He brought half of an aging Scottish squad into our team, unfortunately, which wasn't great, but I believed in it. He brought one of the worst players, Alex Forsyth. The only thing he did ever that was good was in a Dennis Law testimonial, I think against Ajax. He scored a brilliant free kick. We won 1-0. But overall, the team, again, it didn't have the legs, enthusiasm that it would have once they got back to the first division. But there was one game, I remember, the first game he was in charge, 1-1 at home to Leeds. Okay. Later on in the season, we played Leeds away. And the Leeds were vying with Arsenal for the league. And when you're at the top, the pressure comes. We're just seeing now with Liverpool. So we went to Leeds, and actually we won 1-0. The game started, and I'm thinking, we're dominating play. What the hell? Against this great so-called Leeds team. And in the end, we won 14 corners to 1 in the first half. I'm thinking, what's going on? And in the end, we won 1-0. I think McCreary or someone got the goal. Unbelievable. So when the mentality was right, we could do it, but not enough consistently to do it. And there were some awful games. We drew 0-0 at home to City. And I mean, my wife hates football. As simple as that. My wife is French. So when she first met me, she just thought I was a little strange, but I'm English, so that explains everything. She now hates football with the same intensity. I love it. She could have gone either way. She went the wrong way. But I took her, we had a weekend in Manchester, to the City game, which there's 10,000 locked out. And at the game was really awful. It ended 0-0. At half-time, she was so bored, she wanted to get out. I said, you can't get out. No one gets out. I want to get out. At half-time, she went down to the turnstile, and it's like she was talking a foreign language. I want to go, please. Pardon? You want to go? What? Nobody wants to go. There's 10,000 outside want to get in. In the end, she had to verbally give them, and she got out. She couldn't take it anymore. But football mirrors life. You have to go to the bad to appreciate the good. So I do worry a bit about some of the younger fans of United these days. They have to go what we went through in the 70s and 80s to appreciate what we have now, what we had now, and so on in the Fergie years. Yeah.
Pete, David talked there about the signings that came in. You know, who stood out to you in terms of the players when Doc first came in and you know wanted to put his own stamp on the team? Can you maybe just talk about some of the players that came in and also your thoughts on him coming in as well, Pete? Yeah,
I don't know if it was him or Farrell. Was it who brought in Jerry Daly, who turned out to be a gem in midfield?
I'll come to Daly in a sec if I can, David, because Daly came in a little bit late, and you're right. That was a key part of the transition from the old to the new, I think. But as Tim said, he actually grafted on about 5 Scots from the Scottish side he'd managed. We already had McDougall, Law, Morgan, and Buchan at Old Trafford. And he bought, this is all in the month of January, he bought Jim Holton, Lou McCarry, George Graham, and Alex Forsyth. He'd made his assistant manager, Pat Crerand, and the press dubbed us Mac United, because we had 11, with the manager and the assistant manager, 11 Scots. Anyway, it was worth a try. I guess Docherty thought those were the type of guys he knew inside out. It didn't start off very well. We didn't win a game until mid-February, and they'd taken over in the December. Drew 4, I think, and lost 2. And then we got a key win against Wolves sometime mid-Feb. Really hard fought. And that kicked off a run where we won 7, drew 3, and lost 2 out of the next, whatever that is, 12 matches. And that lifted us. Those guys that you've got up there on the screen, they lifted us to 18th in the league by the end of May 1973. We escaped relegation. Tommy Dock had done what he came in to do. As David quite rightly says, it was there was some good victories in that, and one of them was winning at Leeds in a night match. I got chased all the way back to the station, but it didn't matter because we've beaten Leeds, and that was always great, still is. I think it was actually Trevor Anderson that scored the goal, Dave.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Who was one of the first? No, it was probably about the third next George Best. There'd been Sammy Mack and somebody else. And anyway, but he did the trick. He got us escaped from relegation mainly with those players he grafted on. They didn't turn into a consistently good team, but they did enough to win games, which before Christmas we hadn't been doing.
Yeah. There are certain games.
He bought Daly around about March time when he bought Trevor Anderson. So he'd got all his Scots in. Then he got Mick Martin as well. So he went very Celtic. A few Scots, a couple of Irish.
Of course, as Gaynor touches on there, Lou McCarry is a legend. His first signing, and obviously we know the immense impact he had on the club. So probably easy to say the best of the lot in terms of what he brought in that initial period for sure. So
he was the longest lasting, and Gaynor's right. And on his debut, and Jim Holton made his debut in the same game, West Ham at Old Trafford. We were losing 2-0. It was nearly 60,000 there, which was almost full in those days. 12,000 more than Liverpool would get, 15,000 more than Leeds would get for the home games, even though we were near the bottom. And 2-0 down, and we pulled back, and McCarry got the equaliser right near the end, David. And for a long time, the song about McCarry was "Who Put the Ball in the West Ham Net." That's where that song started, and it moved on to "Who Put the Ball in the Liverpool Net" 5 years later, 4 years later, and then it became Ollie's song. But Lou McCarry was a hero right from that first game. The Stretford end loved him, and he gave everything in a United shirt.
Yeah, he ran around like a terrier. A lot of times, as fans, you want to see yourself on the pitch. Even like for me, Gary Neville, never the greatest of talent, but with application and playing out with skin, he was us. Lou Macari was us, being everywhere. We would run through brick walls. I don't know, 10, 20, 30,000 a year. I would pay them to play like that, you know.
Yeah.
So certainly, that's what most fans or most clubs is someone who would die for the shirt, you know, and not just do Memphis come to a reserve game in a roller or whatever. Someone who can relate to the fans. But there are some games, you mentioned it, Leeds away and a few others. When you're away from home, you can say, hide your scarves, hide your scarves. You can do that. You can't hide your Cheshire grin. I was smiling all the way out of the Ellen Road. I couldn't stop it, you know. We've done them, you know. That means that Arsenal were going to win the league that year. Brilliant, you know.
You touched on the point about players like Keane, like Neville, being the embodiment of you as a Stretford ender or wherever you stood, scoreboard ender, Stretford paddock, wherever you were, it didn't matter. You bled red and white. But Tommy Dock and Paddy Crerand as managers were like that as well. Tommy Dock, I always felt, was like me in the manager's dugout. Before that, it had been very well suited, well spoken, old school. But he did energise the Stretford end right from the start. When he brought all these Scottish players in, Tim, within days, we played 2 home matches, I think, within a short time. Everton at home, remember, on a night match, and then that West Ham game.
Yep.
Red United supporters started donning tartan. We had tartan scarves. It was 2 years before the Bay City Rollers came in.
We were ahead of our time, yeah.
We were ahead of it, yeah. And I can remember that West Ham game. I've forgotten till this point, just before Macari scored, and they're all singing. They're singing out United songs, but there's a big Scottish feel about it. There was a guy stood up on one of the crush barriers on the Stretford end, started playing the bagpipes, Scotland the Brave. And the Stretford end was going crazy. It was already crazy. It was already wild, trying to pull this back game back to 2-2. And I swear, like, he played Scotland the Brave. I've never seen that a football match before that, and I've never seen it since. But he energised, Docherty coming, it energised the Stretford end, and it didn't need a lot of energising. It gave us our belief back. We had our tail between our legs for a year or so. And you can't live on that. That won't get you points necessarily. But that transferred to the pitch gradually through 73, I think.
Now, Pete,
go.
Sorry, just another question for the both of you is, you know, we hear about Docherty and bringing the style back to United and playing attacking football. Was that present right from the start, or was that sort of an evolution into that style, you know, sort of once he had the players, because he's taking on a squad that isn't necessarily his? He did bring in some players, but how long did that take to sort of develop?
73-74 season, he started off very defensive. He thought he'd learned from maybe Brian Clough and others, defence is best. He tried a system which our players weren't suited for. So we played boring football. His mantra, which I understand to a certain extent, tells the goalkeeper, don't boot it upfield. Pass to a back who passes to somebody. So by the time you arrive at the halfway line, you're still in possession. Now, that in theory, it makes sense, but it's half boring to watch. And about, 2/3 of the way through the season, we were playing crap football. We weren't going anywhere. Suddenly, the light bulb moment, well, I got nothing to lose. And suddenly, 3/4 away, and one would say too late, he changed. I remember Good Friday, we played Everton at home, 3-0. This is the start of revival. Then 1-1 Southampton, and then we lost 1-0 away to Everton, and that little bubble burst. But he learned too late, and obviously he continued in the second division. Great, he learned too late. Attack is in our DNA. No matter what players you've got, it's in our DNA. We're not defensive-minded. And so that was a story in many ways of 3/4 of the 73-74 season.
David, spot on again, Tim. It was almost a season of two halves. He's right. There's 2/3 and a third. We got panned in the press in the autumn and winter of 73 for playing dour defensive football. Funny enough, we played Leeds again at the start of the next season. It was a 0-0 draw. got absolutely panned. We'd stopped Leeds, who had won the first 7 games of the season. We'd stopped them that winning run, but we got panned for playing it very defensively. A measure of that was our top scorers at Christmas. There was 3 of them, and they had 2 goals each. Striker Sammy McElroy, striker midfielder Bobby Charlton, or it might have been Kidd, forgive me, and goalkeeper Alex Stepney.
Who got
Alex
2
Stepney started taking the penalties in October 73. He took a penalty against Birmingham at home. Funnily enough, Georgie Best had come back, won 1-0. He scored the winner. So there he is. Now that won the game for us against Birmingham at home. But we were only scraping wins. We couldn't score for toffee. I think at the end of that season we had our lowest goals for since something like 1922, or it might have been one of the lowest ever. Mm-hmm. He had another here that you're showing now, which was against Leicester. Yeah, I think the Leicester one was the first one. We lost 2-1 in September, and he scored that. We were 1-0 against Birmingham in October, and he scored then. And then he missed one against Wolves at the start of 74, and they said that Docherty decided this wasn't a good idea. And I think had a good talking to his strike force and said, look, what the hell are we doing? Letting the bloody goalkeeper take penalties. But it was a measure of how difficult Manchester United had found it to score. The scorers were starting to go. Law was injured. He would go in the summer. Charlton was going to retire. But the point David makes, when it got to about March, we hadn't even won an away game. Mm-hmm. We were right near the bottom. There's a story that I've heard from a couple of sources, David. You've probably read about it as well. That Docherty and Busby, I don't know if they had a formal meeting or they just bumped into each other in the corridor at Old Trafford around the time at the start of March. I think Leeds had put us bottom of the league with a 2-0 win at Old Trafford in Feb 74. And we were going nowhere. Even the loyalists, most optimistic of fans, thought, not that we were relegated yet, but as David said before, how are we going to get out of this? The chat between Busby and Docherty went along the lines of, I wasn't there, so I'm paraphrasing this. What you thinking, Tommy? He said, well, look, we're going to try our best. We're going to keep battling. But I've got to be honest, Sam, that relegation might be, we might end up getting relegated. He expected almost to get sacked on the spot. He wrote, Tommy Doc wrote. But Busby said to him, the great man, the wise man, he said, look, if we've got to go down, we'll go down. If we're relegated, we're relegated. He said, but let's go down fighting. Let's go down trying to play attacking football. That's the United way. As David says, it's in our DNA. We won the following game at Sheffield United, a 1-0 away win, our first away win of the whole season. Drew 1, lost 1. Went and won at Chelsea in fine style, 3-1 at the end of March, and then had a really, really good April. And it looked like we were going to escape. I think the results were something. I think we won 5 out of about 7 games and drew a couple of others. It looked like we were catching up, but the young team was running out of steam a little bit. And we had 3 games to go after that one that you've got there. And sorry, we had 8 games, but it's 42. And by that was March the 30th, Tim. I think when you get to around about the middle of April, we've closed the gap a bit. We've won a few. We're on 40 there. It's still possible to escape. The trouble is, Southampton and Birmingham put in a bit of a run as well. Norwich were always going to go down. They couldn't score either. And we lost the last 3 games all by 1-0. We run out of steam. But that little run, or that good run that Doc put together, I think he realised, David, that the team he'd assembled over that last 14 months was now actually able to play more of a passing game. And I remember that Stepney stopped doing his long kicks down the field and started throwing it out from the back. But as you rightly say, that can be boring football, playing it up slowly. But we got forward very quickly, out to the full-backs. No sooner was it up to the midfield players, ping, 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 up to the forwards. And we were a different team. We started scoring 2s and 3s in that late run in 73, 74. Mm-hmm. But it was too late, and sadly, it was to end in the worst of all circumstances. Losing at home to Manchester City, they didn't put us down. Even if we'd lost that day at Birmingham, we would have still have. Sorry, if we'd have won that day, Birmingham would have escaped. But Dennis Law, God bless him, who'd been the biggest of heroes at Old Trafford, let go by Tommy Dock the summer before, signed for City on a free. We couldn't score. Dennis couldn't stop scoring. We couldn't score, sorry. Dennis Law couldn't stop scoring even for City. And in the end, reluctantly, I think, he backheeled one that put us down. And it started one of the biggest, well, the biggest riot at Old Trafford, which I'm not trying to glorify, but it did end in ignominy. We were relegated that day. The crowd abandoned the match after 88 minutes, but the result stood. The fences were erected at Old Trafford then for several years, and there was talk of banning us or relegating us to the 3rd division. But it all came together in a melting pot, really. All the frustrations of the previous few years, the fans really just couldn't take it, and I don't blame them. I was one of them.
I didn't go on the pitch, but I witnessed it all. But I remember we knew even when Dennis put the ball in that he wasn't responsible, because we all had our transistor radios. We knew that Birmingham had won, and that whatever Dennis did, we wanted to say, look, Dennis, nothing to do with you. He didn't know that. So when he backheeled that goal, he thought that was the end of it. I've done it. I want to take it back, just a little story. The previous game, we were away Southampton. Now, I'm a Cockney Red. A lot of my mates, because they're not well educated, they support London teams. But we'd all agreed amongst us that if our local amateur team, which in our case was Ilford, where the old black and white films come from, if ever Ilford get to the FA Amateur Cup final, we'd all go and see. Now, I was the only one. They all bottled out of it. We were playing Southampton away, vital relegation battle at the Dell. But I went to see Ilford play Bishop Stortford at Wembley. Ilford lost 4-1. They nobbled our only good player. And as soon as the game was over, I rushed on the tube down to Waterloo Station and met all the hordes of the Red Army coming out as well. So I got almost the best of both worlds. Well, at least I was with the United fans at Waterloo Station. But that was a game that I'll always remember. But other things about that season, we lost 3-0 away to QPR. I think Stan Bowles had a brilliant game. But I remember when the 3rd goal went in, everybody left. United in. I suddenly went, God, bloody freezing here, isn't it? You know, those are sort of images that I remember because they'd all left and so on.
That was on New Year's Day, David.
Yeah, that's why it was freezing, yeah.
Yeah, and it was Georgie Best's last game ever.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, we didn't know it at the time, but that was.
No, yeah. It'd come back for 2 months. It'd come back for 2 months and quite overweight, out of shape. I remember they arranged a lot of friendlies at the end of that of 73, and I went to all the games then. I stayed out of marriage for a long time, David, so I didn't have to compromise myself too much, so I could just go wherever I wanted. And we played friendlies. I went down to Portsmouth for a friendly on a Tuesday night. Tommy Dock signed my programme for me. Up to Partick Thistle for a friendly on bonfire night. And the Glasgow Fire Brigade were on strike, so that was quite lively. But Bestie couldn't do it. He couldn't get the weight down, God bless him. And he's still my hero and still the best player I've ever seen. But it was sadly a sad exit. And that was going to be his last match. We didn't know it, as David said. It was just it shows the move from the old to the new. Docherty bought Stuart Houston, another Scot, and he made his debut in that game. Yeah,
I also remember because in the following game, Bestie thought he was going to play in the FA Cup, 3rd round against Plymouth. But
yes, that's right.
Bad man management or whatever, we only found out as we were going to the ground, Bestie wasn't going to play, Bestie stormed out. And so that's the last time we ever saw him. And we beat the mighty Plymouth Argyle 1-0, but you knew something was wrong. For all his flamboyance, Tommy Docherty wasn't the best manager. And I think that's what did him in the end. Could motivate people for short spells, but not continuously, and rub people up the wrong way. Of course, since then, everybody's come out with stories and so on, but we weren't to know that at the time.
Well, Tim touched on it.
Just really quick, Pete, before you go on, the picture of you there with the dock, and of course the tartan scarf around your neck.
Tartan scarf, yeah. I think
Scotland badge.
I mean, I never had any real affinity to Scotland before that, but we all done the tartan, and just by way of how fanatical we probably were, we could all relate to it. When England played Scotland in the home internationals, they used to play every year in '73 at Wembley. I went down with my mate who went on the Stretford end with Jeff Malloy, and we had all our tartan on, and we supported Scotland, which sounds very fickle, but it had 8 players from United playing. So it was, and I didn't go to internationals. I've been to very few matches in my life where it's not been United playing. You know, we've all been to them, like David mentioned the Ilford one. But went to that one, and it was amazing to see, first of all, the Scottish fans in action at Wembley. That's a story in itself. But the United team were there. We all donned the tartan, and the badges are there to show it, the tartan scarf. I think the next badge down, but it's not in the picture, says it's a sew-on badge that says, next to United, I like sex best.
If you remember, in those days, it wasn't just England versus Scotland in the home internationals. It was the English League versus the Scottish League. And a lot of Scottish players got in the Scottish League team, and we would support them over the English team, who were boring.
Yeah.
The England team, to digress just a little bit, I didn't actually make the World Cup finals, couldn't get a ticket. But I went to a lot of England games after that for many, many years. England were always boring. I remember one game at Wembley, we beat France 5-0, I think 69. We were still boring. Going to the United game, even when we were bad, there's always something to get the excitement going. We had one player, like a story more, Jesper Olsen. There's always one person that was worth the entrance fee. You know, we lost more than we won, but you never know. There was an unexpectancy. And that's what was the excitement, because if in your own lives, things weren't so great. I mean, a general overview. As United, for me personally, as United went down in the early 70s, music came up because we're all into pop music. Then after pop music, it divided. You were a skinhead, you went to one side. I went the other way. I was into progressive rock, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Rory Gallagher, The Faces, Allman Brothers Band. So the worse United became, the better the music came. And there's certain things in life, sex, music, and football. The 3 most important words, I was there. You can watch it on TV, you can do whatever, but nothing beats being there. So even when you're losing,
amazing.
I thought you were going to give us examples of each category then. And just wondered if we need to. I'm just thinking we should have put the start time back a bit.
Yeah. Now, seeing the back, how good a record was you bought on labels like Vertigo, Elektra, Chrysalis, whatever, taking a band you never heard of, came home, blow your brains out. Then you saw them on stage, another dimension. And it's a bit like United. It was part of the build-up, the Warwick Road, the horrible smells, the guy who said, Jesus saves, we all took the Mickey out of him, but he still had his smile. It was the whole, it wasn't just the 90 minutes of the game.
It's amazing.
The whole experience.
Yeah.
And you can't bottle that. You can't, if you haven't experienced it, you won't know. You're on the outside looking in. You had to have been there, you know. Because football can get the higher highs and lower lows than anything else on this planet, in my opinion.
I think you tapped in there, David. You're right about the close link between football and or sport, but particularly football, I think, and rock music or pop music. Many a lad and many a girl have they've been those two things have been hand in hand. And you'll know this from the early 70s with the atmospheres that were at the football matches. We had a song for nearly every, we had a chant for nearly every song in the chart. Not every song, but so much more than now. And that's not knocking the current United following. But Obla Di Obla Da, Man United, a record had come out and Jim Holton had only been there a week or two. Bowie was at number 2 because the Sweet kept him off number 1 with the same song, basically. They had Blockbuster, he had Gene Genie. But the chant of that Gene Genie rhythmic chant, the Stretford end adapted for Jim Holton. I think in the charts was Jeff Beck with Hi Ho Silver Lining. And in that January, when it was in the charts, United signed all those players. And so it was adapted to Hi Ho Silver Lining. Man United made another signing. And so it was inextricably linked, football or Man United and your pop. And if you went to a Rod Stewart concert or a Faces, which I was lucky to do,
the tartan and everything else.
That was like a football match, wasn't it? You know, so and there is something you can see when, sadly, as Tim said at the top of the show, I'm sounding all professional now, aren't I? About sadly we lost Tommy Doc. We shouldn't forget that. As a man and a family man and a person. But the outpouring of people that had been silent for many years, and all you'd heard perhaps is a few people that had knocked him because he was a wheeler and dealer. The outpouring of people, and they did it in the last 24 hours with the tweet that Tim put out about your memories of the Stretford end. Yeah. Those times in the Doc's era were so magical because it was an adventure. A home game was an adventure. Certainly was for you because you travelled 400 miles there and back. Away matches lasted from Friday night till Sunday for, say, games in London or Southampton or Ipswich, and you were planning it from the Tuesday before, and on the Monday you'd only stop talking about the match the weekend before that. So you did live and breathe it because it was so exciting. Now, I know when you get to our age, you can have a nostalgic feel for things that were great in the past. The music, the football, the women, whatever, the football, the programmes on TV. But it isn't nostalgia with the Tommy Doc thing. He was, to many United supporters, it was some of the best days of their lives. Even though they've lived through the Fergie and Atkinson eras, which were brilliant. Tommy Doc's, the raucousness, it's like being a pirate on the high seas rather than in the Royal Navy. The adventures that we had were so different, and it was those adventures tied in with the football that made the wildest and most memorable of times. And I think it needed a man like Tommy Doc to do it. He wasn't a prime minister for peace. He was a prime minister for war, like Churchill was. And he got us out of, as I said earlier, some of our darkest times and formed, I think, the modern day Manchester United. And thank God others built on that right up to Fergie, and hopefully Ollie will take it further on.
He just had that ability. He just seemed to have that ability to lift people, didn't he? There was just something. There was an aura about him, especially when I talk to longtime Reds like you guys. That's sort of my takeaway from the doc was just there was a charisma, there was an aura that just seemed to lift people. One thing we didn't touch on that I wanted to ask you guys about was when he first came in that 72-73 season. He sort of, a couple draws, a couple losses, but it was really that undefeated run, I think, of 8 games starting March 17th that really saved us that season from the first season from going down. Was there something that changed? I'll put up the games here for people to see. Was there something that changed? Or sorry, that's the wrong slide. Bear with me here. It was 8 games for survival in 73. From March 17th to April 21st, where we were averaging under a point per game leading up to that point. And then for that 8-game stretch, we doubled our average for points and just went on this amazing run to sort of, did something change during that period? Or was it just his ability to lift the players and have them save us essentially?
It's difficult to say, but as a fan, we saw it on the pitch. What was the catalyst for it? I don't know, whether Tommy took off his own blinkers and thinking, I've got nothing to lose. And so we went more attacking, and though the players were aging, they still had the talent and they're able to impose themselves. And we talked about the Leeds 1-0 away, which was a wonderful one. It was beginning to flow. Then unfortunately we had the summer holidays and we know what happened the following season. The good thing about the bad year, the following season, was that in the end we brought in the young ones, just as Fergie did in years to come in another era and so on. And with the energy and talent of the young one, which we can touch on next time in the second division, youth with its extra energy and fearlessness, that was where it's at.
Yeah. Yes, I agree with that 100%. I don't think there was one particularly magical thing. Those results could bring back lots of memories. He made us hard to beat, and certainly another player that really did play his part. We talked about Macari and the impact he had. Gaynor reminded us of that earlier. Jim Holton was another instant hero. A big fella, not the most cultured footballer, but 6'2", eyes of blue. Big Jim Holton, after you.
Yeah.
It's a great song.
Stretford Ender or an avid United fan like David was then and I was then, we were losing our heroes. The testimonials were happening every other week for Bill Foulkes and Paddy Crerand and Tony Dunn. In that period, at the end of 73, just after that run you put up there, Tim, Bobby Charlton retired at the end of Chelsea in 73.
1-0 away loss, yeah.
So Bobby went. Tommy Dott let Law go in the summer, as I said, and George came back a little bit later for 2 months, but had gone by New Year's Day 74. We lost the Holy Trinity, the three greatest, I wouldn't say the greatest players we've ever had, but some would. But we built statues to those three people. I think we're still the only club to have three players who won the Ballon d'Or playing in one team.
And
Law won it in 64, Charlton in 66, Best in 68. These weren't just good players. These weren't Sané and the other fellas that Liverpool have got now, who were good. These were giants of football. And they went within 3 months of each other, 4 months. So I think in that run you said there, Law played his last game against Norwich. Charlton scored his last goal in that Southampton game. I went to that. Charlton played in that Southampton game, retired a few weeks later, scored a goal that set a new club record. He was already the record goal scorer for United, but of course scored again, so it's a new record and took him up to 249.
Yeah.
That's 44 years. So Wayne Rooney beat it in January 2017.
Yeah.
So we're losing this massive element. But Jim Holton came in as a new hero. He got hammered by Jimmy Hill. Do you remember on Match of the Day, David?
Jimmy Hill had anybody who wasn't right and proper, middle of the road. So that's a badge of honour to be pillared by Jimmy Hill in my book.
Yeah, Cantona got the same treatment. But Jim Holton did tighten things up with Buck, and they were a good relationship. There was another player came in just after that, though. Jerry Daly came in at the end of that season, but as David said, started to star later. In September 73, so the season went down, a very young Ryan Greenough was given his debut at Ipswich. Yep. We got a 4-0 hammering, but the young lad, again, stood out. And the thing that stood out was his Yorkshire tenacity. He'd pull that shirt on and you could tell instinctively from the terraces, he was giving everything for us. And he went on to be a great midfielder and then a very good centre-half. So the new heroes were coming through, but we didn't know yet. But Jim Holton, Jerry Daly, McElroy had come back from his car crash, and young Brian Greenough. The old guard was starting to go. The new guard was coming in. With hindsight, it looked like a natural transition, but Docherty made that happen. He selected who stayed, who went, who came in, when they came in, and he needed to be a bit ruthless, I think, to do that. And he did it. And I think most Reds recognised that. And the football, then we went on to serve up, which we'll cover in part 2. The football that we served up in the next 3 years was to die for.
Just a couple of comments to get here real quick. Barry. Great entertainment, lads. Thanks.
Hello,
Thanks for the kind word, Barry.
Thanks, Barry.
Gaynor comes in. Totally agree, Pete. And
all right.
Thanks for keeping us updated in the comments. Cheltenham up 1-0 against City. So
I've just seen it. Brilliant. That's making our Saturday night. There's still 20 minutes to go.
Amazing.
We should stress, Tim, that although we're older guys here now, anyone can see that. But to see me and Dave, still keep those those good looks. But we don't just live in the past. As soon as they open Old Trafford up again, I'll be in there. So I very much look back at the past, but I don't stare at it. But it's the future that counts, and City going out the cup will be a good thing.
I guess we finish up the episode, we'll end part one with something that we touched on, but Pete, the last day the third last game of the season, against City in the 73-74 season, where perfect,
thank you.
Love it. Where obviously Dennis Law and David's right. I mean, the Law goal was inconsequential at the end of the day, but the scenes that it sort of sparked, first of all, 2 pitch invasions, sort of just after the goal. For people that haven't seen it, I'll just play a clip of it here for everyone.
Lee pulled across for Law. Dennis has done it! We've got an invasion of the pitch that we could well do without. The referee is wanting to take the players off. There are officials down on the touchline talking to him, and the pitch rapidly clearing. And we've now got fans on the field again, spilling over from the corner on my right. And I suspect that we shall see the referee calling the players off. Yes, he's taking them off.
So obviously, a couple pitch invasions. I've read and heard that the hope was that the game would be abandoned and therefore have to be replayed, and that was the thinking for the first pitch invasion. But was that just synonymous? I mean, David, you talked about the music and the fan culture at the time. Was that just something that was just part of that era that gave birth to that?
Combination of 6 years of decline.
Yeah.
And as a fan, you felt so much, but you couldn't do anything. That's the frustrating thing. If you could go on the pitch, if you could wring someone's neck, do something, you couldn't. And in the end, rightly or wrongly, it was just an explosion of Once it was out the system, summer holidays, let's go, second division. But that was just a culmination. It wasn't right, but it was totally understandable. That explosion of frustration, that the club let the decline happen, which should never happen. When we can talk about,
it was frustration. I do like a balanced argument in court, and for the defence of the Stretford end. At the end of every season, then right up to late or the 80s, we ran on the pitch at the end, the last home game of the season. I've got 3 jars behind me in coffee jars. Still got me pitch from 1974, 75.
Exactly the same thing. You
got a bit of the pitch and put it in your combat jacket and ran off. Yeah. So there would have been a pitch invasion, but it had a little bit more edge to it. And something that I'm going to say a lot of people I don't think know, but I'll give you 2 pennyworth. That was the second Manchester derby in 6 weeks, because the one at Main Road got postponed in December and was played in March. There was a lot of aggro at that game at the night, and there was still a lot of bad feeling between United and City supporters then. Was that the derby where the first one, did Lou Macari and Mike Doyle is that the one where they got sent off? I doff my cap to you, sir. Yes. The Manchester Evening News had a headline, Manchester's Night of Shame. Yeah. There was fighting all the way back to Manchester. And just a little add-on. 4 days before that, Manchester United had played a friendly against Glasgow Rangers. If anybody was there in the 23,000, they don't need a reminder. It was anything but a friendly. Rangers regarded Manchester United as a Catholic club. We'll park that. Yeah. There was a number of Rangers supporters that stayed down. They were called the Light Blue Organisation, and they stayed down for the match on the following Wednesday and joined up with City supporters to have a go at United. And that word got out about that. So those riots happened for a number of reasons on the 27th of April, I think. But there was a little bit of hangover from what was only a game played in the middle of March. Mm-hmm. So it's not excusing it and it's not glorifying it, but I believe those stories are true, but I couldn't prove them in court.
Well, as we
midweek game, as a Cockney Red, midweek games were difficult. The European games, League Cup games, like the two legs against City, which eventually we went out. I'll do all of those, but some of them and the testimonials, because the players meant a lot to me. But something like the Glasgow Rangers, I never went to, and I've heard horrific stories from all angles about that one. That they were the scummiest of all the supporters. I mean, I went to the Bobby Charlton.
You can say that living in Spain. I'm not going to pass any comment. I'm still on the mainland.
We did the 0-0, the Bobby Charlton testimonial. A time when we were playing crap, we played very well, and the Celtic fans were going bananas, but in a good way. Unlike the Rangers fans, the coaches behind us, the whole things were jumping up and down. That's a way of going OTT, supporting your club, not the way the Rangers fans did it. But that's to say another story.
Yeah.
Well, as we close out part one, like you guys touched on, the Holy Trinity is gone. 73-74 sees us relegated to the second division. What as people that were as the supporters that were there, what were you thinking at the end of that season? Was there the thought that the dock could rally us and get us right back up? Did you have faith in the dock to get us back up? Tell us what was your mindset heading into 74-75?
We'd seen glimpses of good football once it was too late. And so we had the summer to calm down and prepare. I think the first game was Orient away. And being a Cockney Red, it literally just 5 stops down the central line to me. So it's crystal clear, everything about the game, we can talk about it. But we took a deep breath and off we go. I think our following home game was Millwall at home. And the one thing I remember, well, 1-4-0. At half-time, they read out the second division scores first, not the first division. Oh, how we laughed. It was just a different aspect, a different perspective on things. But that was a hell of a year, and one of the most brilliant years for following Reds taking over towns and so on. But more of that later.
It's so true. I think David and I might have been separated at birth. If I may, just briefly, I'll leave it on the 1973-74 season. We'd gone down. I can remember I was courting, then I was going out with a young lady, and we went to a disco at a local cricket club in Whitefield. And I didn't really want to go out. We'd been relegated. My God, Manchester United relegated. But we went out, and I felt numb. Numb was the best way I can describe it. But I went out and did my bit. People were very good. Whilst I'd had my leg pulled for the previous 2 years about United are going to go down, when it actually happened, the City fans were okay, and the people that were anyone but United were actually okay. It was like a member of my family had died. But I was very quiet that night, very quiet on the Sunday, reading all about it and all the riots that were in the papers. And Georgie Best had run off with Marjorie Wallace, when he should have been beating City. But on the Monday night, we had one more game to play, and it was Stoke away 1-0. A poor game, we won 1-0. Mm-hmm. United took 10,000.
Yeah, brilliant game. I went to that.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's incredible,
David. The whole. Many times we sing, "We'll never die, we'll never die, we'll keep the red flag flying high." It was sung almost non-stop that night, and all the talk was. I think there was a Mungo Jerry song. She's something dressed in black, dressed in black, dressed in black, dressed in black, black, black. So we adapted it. We'll be back. We'll be back. We'll be back. 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 We'll be back. And that's all it was. It wasn't the greatest lyrics in the world, but the feeling on the terraces were, we'll be back. Fingers crossed. we weren't going to give up on them. Nobody shouted for Docherty's head. Nobody shouted for the board to go. Nobody said they were going to throw the towel in and go and support another team. I'm not going to have a go at any present-day fans, but I'm just telling you, Manchester United got relegated. We were absolutely broken-hearted, but the love for the club never wavered 1 centimetre.
Mm-hmm.
It's that
That's
sense
terrific.
of belonging, us against the world. It's always been there. It'll always been there. Every fan says their club is special, but believe me, there's nothing about that can match the connection between a United fan and his club. Wherever you go in the world.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Oh,
Absolutely.
if I travel, I'll wear a United badge or something, and I'll see
Yep.
somebody's eye, they've noticed it. And that instantly is a conversation, and we bonded like that. United.
Absolutely. Well, that's a tremendous place to leave episode 1 or part 1, and it sets us up nicely for part 2, which if you keep an eye on our Twitter page, we'll have Pete and I will post all the details as to when that is going to take place. Do like the video, subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for those who got your comments in. David, thanks for joining us and showing us your shirt. Love
There'll be
it.
another one next time. Ha ha ha.
You'll be back with us for part 2, obviously. I can't wait to hear some of those stories from the 2nd division. That's gonna be great. And Pete, obviously, you'll be back with us. So we will see you for part 2 of Oh Tommy Tommy. Take care, people.
Bye.
Bye, folks. Thanks very much.